You know, I'm a little nervous. Are you nervous? Why would you be nervous? But I'm nervous because I'm going to talk to you about the government. And that is kind of scary, why you shouldn't trust the government. Now, when I give this talk to my students, I find that people tend to fall into one of two camps. So either they say to me, oh, this is so obvious, why the hell are you wasting my time? Of course I can't trust the government, and so I never will. Or they'll say something like, well, obviously you're an anarchist and you want to blow things up, and so we don't want to hear from you. And I'm hoping that what I'm going to tell you today is going to be give you a little bit of a different perspective, right? So neither one of those camps is true, and that's kind of what I want to leave you with today. Now, I want to clarify this before I begin, that what I mean by government is all of it. So I'm talking about politicians, I'm also talking about public school teachers, I'm talking about public doctors, I'm talking about the public defender's office, I'm talking about courts, I'm talking about judges, I'm talking about governments all over the world. Right? So this is not about the UK, not about the US, not about India, not about China. This is everywhere. Yeah? It affects all of us. Okay. So I want to start by telling you a story about this man. Now, this is a guy, his name is Lord Thompson. He's a fascinating man. Okay? Now, Lord Thompson was an engineer. Right? He was a military man in the British military, but an engineer. And he rose to the top. He became a politician and rose to the cabinet of the United Kingdom. In 1924, he's put in charge of the Air Ministry. Don't be surprised you haven't heard of the Air Ministry. It was a thing back then. Because back then, a journey from London to Karachi in India took 17 days by sea. 17 days. And Lord Thompson's brought in to research or help develop air travel. Air travel will cut this journey down to 3 days. From 17 to 3 days. Air travel is kind of a big deal at this time. Now the government's in talks with the private sector to get them to build them an airship that will do the journey to India in 3 days. Lord Thompson, he's an engineer. He comes and takes over the Air Ministry and he says, you know what, the public sector can build a better airship. So he puts that proposal to the government. Now what the government does is it's amazing. Great story. It takes both proposals on board. It asks the private sector to build an airship. It asks the Air Ministry to build an airship. And it's going to be a competition. Okay? The first sector to make it to India in 3 days. That's the competition. So the private sector builds the R100. The public sector builds the R101. Because why? 101 is one better than 100. So they're both going to work. They're building these things. Now I can tell you, just flashing forward to the end of the story, one of these airships cost far more than the other. One of these airships was far heavier than the other. One of these airships crashed on its maiden voyage to India, while the other one did not. Can you guess which sector built the airship that crashed? Public sector or private sector? Yeah, most of you have guessed it, yeah? It's the public sector. Now most people actually guess that, and that makes me kind of sad, actually, that we all have this perception of the public sector. Yeah? And the reason why you have this perception is you have some idea of the way the public sector works, right? Maybe you don't like it, or maybe you... But the thing that you may not have considered, and the thing that I'm going to be talking to you about today, is the public sector worker. So this is the guy or the girl who's working in the public sector, right? Think about the workers who are building these airships. Right? Those are the people I would like you to keep in your head. Okay? Now, is it the case that the public sector workers were worse? Maybe they were low motivation people. Maybe they're lazy. Maybe they're low ability, right? Maybe they're not as good. as the private sector workers. Yeah? These are some of the perceptions of public sector that we carry around in our head. It turns out that if you ask Google, what it thinks of government workers, it says things like lazy, not efficient, overpaid, parasites. Nah, that's a bit much, right? So you can consider, one of the reasons why we'd say the R101 crashed and the R100 didn't, maybe because they're less motivated. Yeah, public sector is less motivated. Another reason may be that they're just not as good as private sector workers. Yeah? Now, I'd like you to consider a third possibility, but before I tell you that, I want to deal with each one of these in turn. So the first thing is about motivation in the public sector. What motivates public sector people to work? We know the contracts are incomplete. We know that wages are not, monitoring is difficult, right? So we know all of these things. So what gets public sectors work? Now, in researching this topic for a number of years, the basic motivation that rises to the top is something called pro-social motivation, which is about motivation to serve the public good. That we work hard in the public sector, they work hard in the public sector because they want to serve the public's interests. Turns out, even when you survey government workers from public sectors that are not all that great, in the grand scheme of things, not very efficient public sectors, they still report higher public service motivation. So it doesn't seem to be that motivation is the key issue. As a matter of fact, not only that, but in our research we also find not only are they more motivated, but they work harder because of this motivation. So they're putting in the effort. So it doesn't seem to be a motivational thing. It might be something else though. It might be that they're just low ability workers. Well, my friends over at the World Bank, they just recently released a report on this. So did you know that 15% of all workers today work for the public sector, work for governments all over the world? 15%, 1 in 7 people work for governments, of all eligible workers. That's a massive number. So big that it's hard for me to say that they're all low ability. The second statistic that's quite stark is that of people with tertiary degrees or higher, meaning college educated or better, 40% are employed by the public sector. So that's a massive, so the public sector is actually a massive employer. Now, if you believe, you don't have to believe this, but if you believe that college degrees mean better ability workers, then it doesn't seem to be that ability explains the difference between the two. So it could be a third thing, right? And that's the third thing I want to talk to you about. So in the example that I told you, the one, I missed out a key detail, or I didn't tell you earlier. The detail is that when the Air Ministry asked the private sector to build it an airship, the private sector had to submit its plans to the Air Ministry. Every step of the way. So anytime they changed the design, they had to tell the Air Ministry. So the private sector is being monitored by the public sector. Now, who is monitoring the Air Ministry? Any guesses? Hardly anyone, right? Hardly any monitoring going on in the public sector. Now, why this is such a big deal is, and I want to illustrate this with a little study that we did. I want you to take a look at this table. This table is actually quite interesting. This table is about a study of the effect of skin creams on rashes. What these numbers are basically the number of people. So 223 people use the skin cream and their rash got worse. 75 people use the skin cream and their rash got better. And so what I want you to do is think about whether the skin cream was effective or not. Now I subjected, keep that answer in your head, the answer is not so important. I took this table and I subjected it to a bunch of public sector workers from all around the world, a pretty massive number, most of them with college degrees or better, who can do the math, by the way, and asked them, tell me whether the skin cream is effective. And 65% got the answer right. So there's only 2 answers. So actually, it's better than a 50. If they're randomly guessing, they're doing better than randomly guessing. Right? 65% better. For a separate set, but almost identical in all characteristics, I gave them this table. Now what's interesting about here is the numbers are exactly the same, but the labels are different. This is a table about the effect of minimum wage laws on poverty. Okay? And I'm asking them, were minimum wage laws effective in reducing poverty? So I'm asking them the exact same question, I'm changing the framing of the question. Now I don't know about you, but I don't have much of an opinion about skin creams on rashes. Yeah? But I have an opinion about minimum wage laws. And most of people in public sector do as well. Okay? So when I subject them to this table, this is the result. The bar on the right is the accuracy rate when they see the minimum wage table. It drops to 45%, worse than chance. Okay? When it's about skin creams or rashes, 65%. When minimum wages, 45%. An incredible drop. And this should scare you. It scared me when I first saw it. Okay? The reason why it's scary is because these people are making these decisions. Yeah? They're taking this table and they have a certain belief about minimum wages. And they're overlaying their beliefs on that table. This is a phenomenon that we've studied in psychology. It's called confirmation bias. Yeah? That you interpret data in a way to suit your own beliefs. So now you can imagine, somebody making a decision to implement a minimum wage law based on what they think the data says. Or somebody implementing more relaxed gun laws because that's what they think the data says. Or somebody that decides to invade another country because they think it's going to secure them a safer country. Or somebody who thinks that that unarmed teenager is about to kill him and so he shoots him. Or somebody who decides that we need to protect our children by teaching them less human rights, not more human rights. All of these are issues that are being decided, being taken over by public sector, by governments today, based on certain beliefs. And what we need to do, or what I invite you to do, is question them. Yeah? We need to question these beliefs. If Lord Thompson, by the way, died in the crash in the R101, if Lord Thompson had been questioned, right, he might have been, well, he wouldn't have been alive today, it's too long, but he might have lived longer than he actually did. Okay, now I'm gonna say one thing. I mentioned this thing about questioning, right? Questioning is really, really important, yeah? Because it makes us work harder. I'll prepare my lectures better when I know that anybody in the audience can get up and ask any question they want, right? It makes me work harder. It makes the public sector work harder. And in order to illustrate this, I took a bunch of economists in the UK. So these are people more close to your homes. Yeah? They're economists. They're really good at math. I asked them to tell me the answer to the minimum wage table that we talked about earlier. Okay? So I did that in the morning. Then 3 hours later, I asked them to do it again. But this time I put them in pairs. So now I'm forcing them to talk to somebody else and think about this problem a little bit deeper. Okay? And guess what happens? Accuracy rate in the morning was 65%. In the afternoon, it jumps up to 76%. It's still not 100%. When you're making these types of decisions, minimum wage laws, invading countries, shooting kids in the back, we need you to be 100% sure. Right? It's still not 100% sure, but it's an improvement. Now, as I told you before, 1 in 7 workers is a public sector worker. Yeah? So we need to ask them the questions. This is not something that we should be farming out to journalists or to activists or to protesters to question these things. Yeah? Because government workers, public sector workers are here, they're among us. Some of you are public sector workers. We need, anytime you come across somebody, ask them whether they work in the public sector, what they do, how they do it. Is it the best way that they should be doing it? Ask them the difficult questions. Ask them the embarrassing questions. Yeah? Make them feel like we're watching and we have their eyes and ears upon them at all times. I know that would make me work harder. I'm telling you, it will make them work harder as well. So they stop making mistakes, which actually affect all of us. They affect all our lives. So I invite you to find out, talk to them, question them, and one day I hope we'll be able to trust the government. But until that day, that's why we shouldn't trust the government. Thank you.